Hiya, folks. Welcome to another episode of Microsoft Azure Community User Group. Today we have a theme of Copilot Studio and Azure and AI. Sorry, before we stay started, we're going to do some housekeeping. 1 minute. Okay. So welcome. So meet the team. I'm Nicholas Chang, and I'm Azure MVP and a senior platform engineer working for Kanos. And Kevin, who's my co-organizer, is running a bit late, and he's another Azure MVP and Azure practice lead from Ergo. Code of Members of the code of conduct. All members of this group should abide by this code of conduct. Be friendly and welcome to everyone. Be patient. Be thoughtful. Be respectful and inclusive. Be open and curious. Always try to ask questions to understand something and not to criticize. So in this agenda, we have Jared McFress, sorry if I pronounced it wrong, and he's an AI architect at 8 Point and Azure MVP. He's doing a session on from FOMO to focus ignite your AI transformation. So that will be an interesting one. And Arlo Run for me, so I don't know if I pronounced it wrong. David's a senior software engineer at Expresso. He's doing a session on who's really the main paddle to building your smarter apps and Microsoft Copilot Studio and .NET. So the next event is April and it's not been confirmed yet. So let's bring our first speaker. Oh, Kevin is here.
I'm here. I apologize. Hey, folks. Sorry for the delay. Just trying to balance work life at the moment with my kids and soccer training and stuff. Jared, hello, and apologies I wasn't at the initial kickoff. Thank you so much for coming online with us, and looking forward to your session.
So before we get started in your session, Jared, do you just want to give us a brief explanation what your session is about?
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much for having me. Jared Mathis, I'm a solutions architect at 8 Point. My session is from FOMO, or the fear of missing out, to focus. And it's really about, how do you approach this behemoth of AI in a way that's focused on driving outcomes and not just chasing the new and shiny toys? And how do you do so in a way where, it's just very methodical. You can start to learn from your experiments and then further expand that. So again, this is one of my newer sessions. I'm super excited to test it out, see what the feedback is. And that's what I'm talking about.
Sounds awesome.
No worries. Looking forward to it. The floor is yours.
Awesome. All right. Well, let me hop right into it. So just as a quick agenda in terms of what I'll be talking about, I'm going to hop in just a very brief intro in terms of who I am and maybe why I'm qualified to have, this conversation. And then I'll really step into the why behind this topic. It was very intentional. I've got a story from a conference where, this really just became, I feel like, an important topic to discuss. And then I'll talk a little bit around like, what is FOMO and sort of why, what does it feel like, in the enterprise? And then I'm going to introduce this framework that I've been working with based on my interactions and my work out in the field. I've seen, a lot of organizations take consistent paths to trying to experiment with AI and then grow from there. And so I'm going to go ahead and lay that out as a framework that might be applicable for you, in your organization as well. And then just really quick wrap up and next steps. So again, hopefully a fun and entertaining session for you all. Before I go too quickly, real quick intro. So again, Jared Mathis, working at 8 Point, been there about 2 years now. I spent a decade in consulting. I spent another decade in aerospace and defense. I'm a Microsoft MVP in the Copilot space. And I've written a couple of books on Copilot, one on Microsoft 365 Copilot at Work, and then a second on Copilot Studio. Both are put out by Wiley. My publisher always says, hey, if you like books, go buy a book. Or if you like to buy books and have them on the shelf behind you, it makes you look smart. That works out too. When I'm not presenting or talking about Copilot or AI, my wife, May, and I love to travel. And when we're not traveling, we're hanging out with our 2 little French bulldogs, one who I believe you can see in the back corner. So again, happy to be here. If you ever want to connect with me on LinkedIn, there's my link tree. I post all my sessions that I present. And that's just a little bit about me. So getting into probably the part that everyone's interested in, the why behind this topic. So I was presenting at the Power Platform community conference last year, and it was in fabulous Las Vegas, which was a ton of fun. And we were talking about agents and sort of what that would mean, to introduce agents into your organization. How do you think through work that people do and what agents might do? And I brought up this slide, which is kind of like a fun little slide that I just like to poke fun at Microsoft with. It's just there's just a lot going on from an AI perspective, and I think too, like, it's hard to get your arms around, like, what do you focus on, where do you get the most bang for your buck, how does it all come together? And the other thing too is there's a lot of feedback that I heard at the conference where people just feel like if they're not completely bought into AI, that they're like missing something, so it's not happening correctly, or they're falling behind their competition. And I think there's a lot of people that are talking about AI, and a lot of people, organizations that are experimenting. But I think it's important to recognize that, like, the number and the quantity or percentages of firms that are like frontier firms and completely, leveraging the full stack of agents and co-pilots and custom agents, it's really that's more of the minority than the majority. And I think that's okay. I think, if we think about how this technology works and how it doesn't work, it really is about experimentation. And I think we have to be, comfortable with that. And we also have to recognize the fact that the technology is not cheap. And when you're in a climate where budgets are shrinking and demands from the business are increasing, you really have to figure out, where do you invest your time and your money so that you get the most bang for your buck. And so again, the kind of like the two for one, please don't think like you're missing out if you're not fully a frontier firm just yet. And secondly, it's okay if you're still in that experimentation phase, because a lot of people really, that's where they are. So to kind of just double down on that whole like FOMO concept and kind of FOMO in the enterprise, I want to share like this kind of like a funny picture. I took this at Ignite. I was working the booth, and if you pause and look at this photo, you're probably like, wow, like Jared's having a blast. Everyone looks really happy. Everything, like all this amazing stuff is happening. And you probably see this picture and go, man, I wish I was at Ignite, because those folks are having so much fun at the AvePoint booth, chit-chatting, talking to customers, and doing all that stuff. And I think just it's kind of the nature of the world that we're in right now, right? You've got social media impacts, you've got, marketing materials, you've got all these LinkedIn influencers. And I think it creates this fear that if you're not also, celebrating these huge wins, that you're not moving forward, that you're being really left behind. And when applying sort of the missing out on fun times you might see on Instagram or on social media, if you also apply that to your organization, I've talked to customers that feel like, gosh, like, our competitors are building agents. All these vendors, they keep on, talking about AI is now embedded in all their core service offerings. And it's like this, like, oh my God, like we're behind. And what I've seen happen when you get into that spin of like, oh my God, we have to have all these different pilots to try all stuff out. And then we're buying like the same tools and duplicative tools just in case something big happens. And a lot of this work is happening without defining like what's like the success criteria for this. Why are we doing this? What's in it for me? What's in it for my customers? What are we hoping to achieve? Because again, from what I've observed, these IT budgets are not growing at the same pace as the cost for this technology. And really, when we talk about the cost of that distraction of like, gosh, I have to do something with AI and I'm not just sure quite yet, or I'm doing the wrong thing, it really comes down to a couple of things. First off, there's this, shallow versus deep work, right? When you're trying to drive adoption and you're kind of on your heels, you're doing more of like demos, you're doing like busy work, and you're not actually focused on solving business problems. I've been in the IT field for 23 years at this point, and the reason why I got into IT is I love solving really complicated problems with technology. I love transforming how people work. My specialization, my kind of focus has always been on, in the SharePoint, like, Teams, collaboration stack, because I love watching people find new creative ways to streamline processes, or maybe to collaborate with colleagues or with partners. And that's just kind of like what fills my cup. Second big thing in terms of like what I see from a cost of distraction is like this decision fatigue. Is if you're constantly, evaluating all these various options, all these various tools, you're slowly sort of eroding your strategic thinking. Like, you're not focused on the right things. You're kind of in that analysis paralysis stage, and then you don't move forward with anything because you're trying to look at everything. So that becomes kind of a challenge. I also see, this having an impact from an operational perspective. I think it's always important to remember that you can't just bring in technology and all of a sudden, hey, we've got AI, now we're a frontier firm. Like, no, there's a lot of other elements that feed into transforming the way you work with AI. And if you have these like fragmented initiatives that are not tied together, you're either solving the same problem multiple times, you're creating, compliance gaps, or you're just creating just a ton of noise where if you don't know what people don't know what your focus is, they might start to think like maybe like either it's an AI problem, it's a you problem, but the reality is it's really just, it's a combination of, you got to focus on the right things. And then lastly, from a financial impact, if you start to buy all these random tools and you're locked into these contracts, you don't use them, you're just really burning money. Right, you're training people on multiple things. There's a lot of rework that happens, and if you're not able to quantify the ROI for the investment, it's really not going to go anywhere. So a question I always like to ask, and this wasn't kind of like a live stream. I said, like, why did you get into technology? It probably wasn't to be spinning your wheels. It was probably because you maybe also enjoy, solving problems with tech, or maybe you also want to help transform organizations, or maybe you also like to chase that shiny new object every now and again too. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't spend any time, chasing the new shiny, but it's important to focus on business outcomes. IT is an enabler to the business to be able to, respond to the market more effectively, to help enable your colleagues to do more with less, to help, shift from lower quality, lower value work to higher quality, more creative work. And that's really why a lot of us got into technology. So I've talked a little bit about, some of the challenges with the, I guess call it the ecosystem right now of AI everywhere, maybe AI everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And I've been working on this framework for how do you start to drive AI transformation within your organization. And then I come up with this framework called Ignite. And I always kind of laugh because people think, oh, is it like a Microsoft Ignite thing? No. I mean, was it inspired by Ignite? Probably subconsciously to some degree. Again, I've been an old school Microsoft nerd for a while now. But to step you through what is Ignite, here it is. It's a multi-step process that you can leverage to help introduce AI into your organization. And it all starts with, inspire. And then, you start to help people understand what's the value of AI, what isn't the value. And then you move to gauging your readiness, figuring out where in your organization might be ready for AI. And then you'll nail some pilots, you'll have some successes, build some momentum, and you'll iterate. You'll learn, incorporate that feedback and drive it forward. You're going to want to track impact to understand, are we seeing the ROI that we were expecting? And then eventually you're going to embed governance so that it's not this one-off project, but something that's very repeatable for you to be able to take advantage of within your organization. So I'm going to step you through each of these different areas of the Ignite framework and talk about a little bit deeper and help give you some examples of what might be helpful for you as you try to drive transformation in your organization. So Inspire is really about starting with the why. And a critical step to starting with that why is meeting people where they are. And I think that that's critically important with AI because, if you're a technologist, like myself, you've been probably pretty excited about ChatGPT and Claude and Copilot and Gemini, and you might be using multiple different services in your both professional and personal life. But there are a lot of people that do not know what AI is and are not using it. In fact, my wife's a nurse and she just started using ChatGPT like 2 months ago because I love her, but she was asking me all these crazy questions. She's taking an assignment up in Vermont. And I was like, hon, I've been to Vermont like 3 times. Like, you should really use ChatGPT to ask some of these questions. She's like, what is ChatGPT? I'm like, all right, well, let me take you through that. So I think it's important to recognize that, everyone's starting place might be very different. And it's really about ensuring that you're going to help, paint this picture and start to showcase like art of the possible, help to tell some stories around, people and processes and how this technology can start to transform what that looks like. And so an example might be, if an HR employee is spending 10 hours a week answering, all sorts of questions about like how much PTO time do I have, when do benefits enrollments start, is there a referral bonus, or any of those random sort of people related questions that you might have. Right. The old way is as a person, managing a shared mailbox, but the new way of doing it might be potentially an agent that's now able to answer 80% of those questions instantly. And maybe it's accessible through Microsoft Teams so that, the person, different time zones, different countries, maybe different languages are able to engage with that agent to get that answer almost immediately. And really, this art of the possible is meant to be used as like a catalyst to get people excited, to get people to start to lean in a little bit, but also, don't be surprised if you get some hesitation from this, right? I think part of AI and transforming with AI is helping to ensure people know what their potential role might be after this transformation. That's certainly an area that's causing just a lot of organizations, a lot of individuals to worry a little bit, just right in terms of like, what's my new role going to be? But as much as important as it is to drive that inspiration about what's potentially possible, it's also super important to keep it realistic. I kind of like to always joke that the marketing material of Copilot is far outpacing people's ability to leverage it. And this is a clip from Minority Report. I think it's important to note that you don't just bring in AI and then your people are like Tom Cruise in Minority Report and moving their hands around and precogs and this, that, and that. Like, it's going to take time for people to pick up these new ways of working, these new skills. What does it mean to have this AI assistant that's maybe either truly assisting or, perhaps, doing some of the tasks that you did today? Or how do you sort of modify the way that you originally were doing work to incorporate this into your new flow? So again, I think just recognize that it's not so much just about the tech. There's also a huge people component to unlocking this. But once you've inspired folks, the next stage in this is really around gauging readiness. What you're trying to figure out is where are you going to hit some risks, and how do you start to overcome that, and which areas of your organization are most likely going to be prepared to be able to take on a change like AI, right? It's if you're working in a regulated industry, like maybe you don't, tackle the most complicated use cases first because you have to worry about not only just the regulatory requirements, but also what do the permissions look like? How big of a data set are we talking about? Are we connected to third-party systems? What does that mean from a responsible AI perspective? So it's really about, not taking on the biggest, most complicated ones, but figuring out what are your risks and where is sort of that area or opportunity where you can start to make some traction forward. And I think it's important to call out the fact that a lot of these AI projects do not move past the pilot stage. And, immediately you're going to probably want to start to call out, well, maybe is it like the service is still very new, or is it is the tech not working? But a lot of times the challenges with getting out of that pilot phase is the fact that you maybe got like data quality problems. especially when it comes to unstructured data that hasn't had proper lifecycle management, or maybe the permissions are a little overshared. Managing security at scale, you want to address oversharing and make sure that your sensitive data is protected. It's about understanding compliance requirements and ensuring that you're meeting regulatory frameworks. And finally, too, it's about making sure that you have a reason to scale this, or have the criteria defined that if this is successful, your organization can make continued investment in this to carry it forward. And that's not really a given. Now, readiness really, to me, it's not a checklist. It's really about starting to operationalize the aspects that are important for you to drive AI forward. And what I mean by that is, for example, people readiness. It's about making sure people understand the role of the technology and their role once you actually start to incorporate that technology into their work. It's about thinking through the processes and making sure that you have clear ownership around maybe intake of a new AI use case. It's about ensuring that you're able to understand what the success criteria for that is, to make sure that you have a way of measuring that to make sure it's effective. It's about ensuring that your data is ready for this particular technology, addressing oversharing or maybe stale content, and ensuring that you have the right people owners in place to understand their role of curating content that's going to be fed up and served through AI or an agent. And it's also about making sure that your platforms are ready, in terms of the ensuring that all the features and appropriate governance guardrails are in place to be able to address this. And a way to help you with starting to plan out, I can actually build the slide out, is you can do a quick little readiness pulse survey, across your people, process, platforms, and data, to ensure, and you kind of score it like 1 to 5, you can start to feel or understand, sort of where you are from a readiness perspective across these different dimensions. And, 1 would be like, not sure, I'm not ready for it. And then 5 would be, that yes, I'm consistently ready for this, that people know what the role of AI is and they know what their role is, that you have processes in place to take in use cases, to evaluate from a risk perspective, and that you have clear success criteria defined as part of that intake, ensuring that your platforms are ready to handle this, that your data is being managed appropriately, and from a data perspective that you have guardrails in place and you know how to monitor and roll back if necessary. So when you fill out the survey, you can start to interpret your scores and figure out, again, where you are across these dimensions. So again, if you're more of like 16, 20, you are ready to really fully scale. But if you're below 10, there might be a little bit of foundational work that you might want to take on within your organization to fully be ready for AI. Now, I want to also call out the fact that while this is very exciting, and as someone that's in technology, this is like the third, if not fourth, in the industrial revolution that we're going through, I think the reality is there's a lot of people fatigue and anxiety when it comes to AI. And it's honestly bigger than just in one group of people. It really spreads across different generations of employees, right? Gen X has gone through career stagnation, dot-com bubble, lots of just chaos. Millennials, and this is obviously a little bit more US focused, but we've had 9/11, we had a financial crisis, we've then brought in the smartphones and social media, and you had the pandemic. Your Gen Z also had the pandemic, but they've also had lots of school shootings in the States, smartphones and climate crisis. And it's just, there's a lot going on. And especially today, literally is March 9th, and there's a lot of happening in our world right now. And I think, a lot of times AI can feel like an added burden on top of those existing anxiety that might persist. And you need to go ahead and lead with empathy. It's really, really important to understand that for a lot of people, they're going to view AI in some ways as a threat. They're going to view it as, this is coming for my job, or this is yet another thing that I have to do when I'm really just trying to do my work and then go feed my family, put a roof over my head. And you have to recognize that. And it's really about ensuring you've got your executive stakeholders in queued in, that are dialed in, that are going to be able to help and support that conversation of what is AI? How are we as an organization approaching AI? And what does it look like when we start to transform our organization? What do we do with these people if we free up their capacity? What is the role of people with technology? Now, once you've gauged, where to focus on, the next step is around nailing pilots. And one of my favorite sayings was, I had an old CIO that I used to report up to, and she always used to ask me, Jared, when you're doing like we're doing a pilot, she always asked me, Jared, are you really trying to prove an hypothesis, or are you trying to like stack the deck? And what she meant by that is, are you trying to prove that you're right, or are you trying to really understand, is this going to work? And so I would just like caution, challenge you that definitely like keep that in mind in terms of the, are you stacking, the deck when it comes to introducing new technology, or when you're picking your pilots. And I just, as a reminder, pilots need to solve a business problem. It's not about like trying out the brand new cool agent technology. It's about what business problem are we going after? It's about scoping it really small, something that's tangible that you can accomplish in a matter of weeks or not months. And success needs to also be defined by what have you learned from it. It's not just about how cool the demo was, but what did you learn? How did that drive the impact? Would it make sense to further invest in it? And think like a CFO, right? Like, are we seeing the return on the investment for this technology? Not just the ongoing cost of it, but all the full cost, and what might it cost to scale it? And I'm going to say, because I hear it all the time, IT kicking the tires and getting a couple Copilot license, that is not a pilot. That is people playing and experimenting. You need to have rigid criteria around how they're evaluating, what they're evaluating for. And to stack the deck for success, it's really about choosing use cases where the data quality, permissions, and workflows are relatively ready to go. Make sure you have people that are engaged and want to participate in it. Try to limit dependencies so you don't have to worry about other teams doing work or other systems. And what you want to do is get some quick wins. You want to get some successes, prove the technology out, and have people feel comfortable that A, you know what you're talking about, and B, that this technology is going to have a positive impact. And so some questions you can ask, and when you're starting to identify potential pilots would be, hey, like, is the business problem clearly defined and felt by the team? And that felt part's important, right? If someone's going to be champion or advocating for a new solution, you need that. Like, you need someone from the business. You can't have IT pushing this down to the business. Business has to start to pull. So someone that's feeling pain in their current role needs to be participating in your pilot with you, right? I'm not going to talk everything on the slide, but just a couple other ones I'll call out is like, what behavior change do we expect if this works? And I think it's important to think through adoption early on in your pilots and make sure that that's part of your criteria. Again, I feel like a broken record, but it's not about bringing the tech in. It's about transforming the way that people work and having them adopt this new way of working. That's critically important. And also make sure that you have a way to capture lessons learned, and make sure you're right sizing it based on the type of individuals and the culture of your organization. Some companies I've worked for, lessons learned are best done in person. Others, hey, just fill out a form. Others will do a quick little 5-minute Teams video, Teams interview, whatever makes the most sense based on your culture. Ensure you have a way to capture those lessons learned, capture that feedback. And that really actually sets up the next phase, which is around iterating. And I love iterate because it's all about moving fast and breaking things. Or another kind of fun little acronym I like to throw out there is iterate is always be calibrated. You have to recognize that a lot of what makes this technology exciting is it's all about experimentation. Your intent is you're going in to learn something new, try something out, and you should be getting feedback from your users. And you should understand, is that something we can tune with the tech? Is that a data change we need to make? Is it something else? Or maybe kind of another thing that I want to pull out there is this something that's really AI? Or is it something that's resolved with business process management or business process automation? Because those are two different types of technologies. And before we kind of hopped on this, I was talking to Nicholas and about what I see a lot of times right now with all this AI hype is people try to solve every problem with agents. And that's probably not the right technology for every single business problem. You want to right size that to figure out, is this business process management or is this AI? And a couple ways of just sort of stepping through that, right? If the process is very well defined and the steps are very repeatable, that's probably more of a business process type of use case. Maybe it's a Power Automate flow or a logic app. But if the steps are a little ambiguous or a little more variable, AI might be able to help. Again, if the rules are well defined and stable, that might be more business process. But if it requires a little bit of intent or a little bit of judgment, then obviously AI is going to help, right? So stepping through these different criteria should help you to understand which technology is the best fit based on the problem that you're trying to solve. One I'll click out too is the user interaction. I'm an old school SharePoint nerd. I built so many forms and workflows, and like that was, God, I think I paid my mortgage for at least 5 years just doing that type of work. I love that. But then there's others where, I mentioned to you before, my wife's a nurse, and for her, natural language is actually a very interesting user interface. As a nurse, a lot of the work that you spend is charting, right? It's basically you're capturing the interaction you have with your patient, and you're trying to upload that to the electronic health records system. And so that's faster for a lot of those nurses to speak through natural language. Also, some nurses don't speak the English. They speak different languages, or English is maybe their second language. So a huge opportunity to not only improve the user experience for those individuals, but maybe even force and drive better adoption with that tech. Right. So kind of keep going forward, tracking impact. So it's important to remember that not everything is important. It's important to really focus and tracking on and measure what matters the most. And it's important to remember, if you can't measure it, you can't scale it, right? And so I think hopefully the goal of you making investments in AI is really around piloting, learning, incorporating feedback, tracking that impact, with ultimately to either kill it if it's not having the impact that you're expecting, or to be able to take it to the next level within your organization, to bring on new use cases, new capabilities. And so it's super important to think through what does that process look like to track that impact, to be able to get people to start to measure and make sure what that criteria is. And so if you're like trying to think through, like, what would I measure? Like what makes sense versus around, think about the outcome you're driving. Is it about, increasing revenue? Or is it driving out cost? Or is it, maybe perhaps, eliminating risk? Or is it more of like productivity based? Are you trying to save time at the task level, at a full process level? Is this going to maybe potentially, help you avoid rework? From an adoption perspective, are people using this? How much are they using this? Are they just kind of dabbling with it? Or are they really, transforming the way that they work and incorporating this into their true flow of work? And how many people are using this consistently? How many times a day? How many days per week? How many weeks per year? Per month? Et cetera, et cetera. And then the one I want to call out too is quality. Like, is this helping to improve the quality? Are people that are the beneficiaries of the output happier with the quality? And are people happier with being able to maybe offload some of the manual work and focus on more higher value work? So these are some areas that you might want to start to think up through when you measure and track that impact that this particular use case is having within your organization. And then you might like to kind of double click in. How do you actually track it? Microsoft has some recommendations. They built this as part of Copilot Studio. So if you're trying to dabble in low code agents, they have a savings per run where you can start to estimate, for a full end-to-end run of this process, like what does that cost look like? Their second one is savings per tool. I'm a little kind of indifferent on this one. Basically, an agent will call a tool, and a tool is basically it's a connector with some actions accessing maybe Dynamics, or maybe can access ServiceNow or Salesforce. So those are two different ways. And so you're trying to calculate your savings by, if it's interacting with CRM, that's a higher value task, right? Because if you're making an update, maybe you're creating a new opportunity in CRM, that's going to drive new sales, new revenue, et cetera. So there might be some value in that versus the run is just more of a business process. So again, a couple of ways of thinking through how to measure from a quantitative perspective. And then this is kind of a quick little run that I like to show. Like maybe you might want to build like a Power BI dashboard, which sort of shows the breadth of the different users of your service or your app or your use case. Show adoption levels, show activity levels, show frequency of usage, and what should hopefully feed into this as well would be a mix of what I'm basically kind of getting at is you want to be able to roll both qualitative and quantitative feedback into your dashboards to help give your executive leadership a view as to what impact this is having within your organization. And I'll just kind of share this real quick as an example of what I've done before from an M365 Copilot perspective. So I spent a lot of time working with customers around evaluating and looking to scale Copilot within their organization, right? At $30 per user per month license. And so what I've done as an example to try to help kind of get the juices flowing is, typically it's the same sort of business case that I've done for 20 plus years. You define your personas, you come up with some sort of full-time equivalent rate. That's basically, the salary plus any sort of fringe benefits. You estimate conservatively what time savings that technology might have from a productivity impact perspective, and you start to build out your quantitative feedback. And then your qualitative feedback is more subjective. A lot of times that has to be self-reporting. People are telling you sort of what that impact looks like within their work. And some of the dimensions that I've seen before, and again, this is not meant to be exhaustive in all of them, but, has the quality of this particular output, my output, grown? I mean, me as someone that's been on Copilot since the early access preview days, for me, I don't think Copilot really saves me a ton of time. I don't get to, slack off early, whatever. I still work the same amount of hours, but I do believe the quality of my output has improved. Net promoter score, rise in job satisfaction. Those are some other elements because obviously it's expensive to attract and retain talent. So, if I'm able to, or I feel like the company is supporting me, and I think this technology is a good investment, I get to focus more on the work I like to do, I'm more apt to stay with this organization. So again, meant to just be an example of what you might want to think through from a quantitative and qualitative perspective as you're approaching AI and some of your use cases. And finally, and I know we're getting a little bit short on time here, but let's talk about embedding governance. And, it's really embedding governance, which is about trying to make governance part of your culture. AI is disruptive. There's, again, I mentioned before, there's, security concerns, there's regulatory concerns, and, you don't want to be in a situation where every use case is going to require you to go through a rigorous sort of review process from a security and compliance perspective. Otherwise, you're never going to get anything off the ground and you're not going to be able to make anything forward. So really, this is about trying to operationalize, evaluating use cases, incorporating the appropriate security and compliance teams, or maybe even have them part of a governance board to try to accelerate your evaluations further. This really is one of the harder steps. I believe that like establishing pilots is relatively easy, but sort of making operating model changes is really hard. And it's not even really a technology problem. It's really about helping people understand that, hi, I was a security engineer today. This is the work, that's my corpus of work today. But now with AI, here are some things I have to now consider, evaluate, some new questions I might need to ask. And so really the way that you get good at this and sort of be able to operationalize it is running experiments and trying to drive them from just being quick little experiments into sustainable operations where people know the roles they're going to play. People know how to evaluate your use cases. People know the work that has to go in to have the right guardrails in place so people don't do the wrong thing. And really what I talk about, some of the guardrails, it's sure you don't have data leakage. Make sure that you're enabling innovation, these new use cases, but you're ensuring that you don't have any biases that are coming in and you're not creating compliance risks. And so some additional sort of governance considerations that must be put in place is really, lifecycle management, whether it be for agents or for the prompts or for workflows, ensuring you're not going ahead and creating sprawl and maintaining this, for weeks or months when it's not actually adding value. It's about having standards in place for identifying the data that's going to be needed by these agents and having the appropriate controls in place to approve that and ensure that the agent doesn't accidentally get more access than it should have. It's also about monitoring the interactions that users have with agents, the prompts, the responses, looking for, has there been any configuration drift? Is it performing as expected? And also make sure there's no misuse, right? One of the concerns out there is the fact that, a bad actor could put some negative or malintended instructions out there, and that could have some serious repercussions. Either, brand, impact the brand, impact, regulatory requirements, could create risk, create all sorts of concerns. So it's really about monitoring the activity and really also training your people, right? Make sure that people understand the work that they need to do, understand what this new world is with AI as you continue to go on and experiment. So again, a lot of content. I wanted to kind of keep within the bounds of my allotted time slot. As a quick sort of a wrap up and a couple of key takeaways. AI readiness is really it's a daily thing. It's not just a checklist. It's really about how do you manage data and permissions every day. And you want to solve with the Ignite framework for pain, not for hype. It's not about feels. It's about actual outcomes you're driving, actual business outcomes. And governance really needs to be a habit. It's not a one-off thing. You need to have operational processes in place to move beyond just experimenting with AI, experimenting with use case, but really incorporating that into your organization. And I'm hoping that this Ignite framework will inspire you to start to look at how you might be able to operationalize AI, how you might be able to pick some high value use cases and go tackle that with your really smart, really sharp technical teams that can help solve these. And last call is if you want to connect with me, that way that's my boy Gus right there has me as an action figure and him as a little stick figure. So happy to connect, happy to have the conversation, take the conversation further on LinkedIn or other socials. But I'm hoping this is something a little bit different than you guys normally get. And I hope it was fun. I hope you enjoyed it. So thank you so much for the opportunity to discuss. And I guess I'll check to see if there are any questions that might have come up in the chat.
So no questions have come in. So firstly, really good session, Jared. I love the way you put it together. I love the way you use Ignite as an acronym. And I totally agree. I was only saying this to Nick offline that it's common, not just from an AI context, but it's common that pilots in general, a lot of them will rarely get to production or will stay there long term. People, just if you don't have the right approach and the right process, it's just going to fall by the wayside. And then when you add in all the cool different ways that you can do AI and everybody wants to get hands-on with AI, having that process and having that governance, which you mentioned towards the end, the governance is as important as the architecture and the technical solution that you're putting in place, because whether it's AI or whether it's an Azure landing zone, if you don't have the right governance in place, your costs are going to spiral, your security, you're going to have all kinds of problems. So yeah, I really like it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Where can people learn more about the Ignite framework? Because it's the first time me hearing about it.
Oh, I should plug it. So coming out in May is a new book that's coming out via A Press that's going to introduce. It's nice. My new colleague is a Copilot is the title. I thought that was kind of funny because it's really just I think that's unfortunately, not say unfortunate, but like that is going to be the future. You're going to have real employees, you're going to have virtual employees, and they're all going to be sort of interacting together. And how do you create an environment where they can both be successful, right? I think you don't want to create an environment where the agents fail. That's not great. But you also want to make sure that the people involved in working with agents are also going to be successful. So yeah, that would be coming out in May. Pre-order it now.
Right, good plug.
Nice.
And if you have a link for the pre-order, drop it into the chat, and we'll bump it up.
Okay, well, no. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Jared. Apologies, I was a few minutes late to join in the start of the session, but I'm really happy.
It's a good session.
Yeah, it was. Okay, cool. So up next we have Olarun Femi Davis. Did I get your name right, or did I say it too slow? Yep. Okay, cool. And as Nick said earlier, his session is titled "Who is Really the Main Pilot? Building Smarter Apps with Microsoft Copilot Studio and .NET." So I'm going to hand over the stage to you, and if you want to check if you can share your screen and let us know if there's anything you need to help with. Can you hear us? Okay, yeah,
Yeah, can I hear you?
brilliant.
All right. Am I live now?
You are indeed. Yep, and I can see your screen as well.
All right. Hi, everyone.
So over to you. I'll jump off here, and if there's any questions coming in, we'll make sure that you get them as well.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Tonight, we'll be talking more about Copilot. And I picked up a few things from Jared's session regarding the future of agents and in the future, how AI can become your colleague or your coworker, actually. So the question I have today for you is: are you starting your software development, or is AI taking the controls? So this presents a different approach, a different point of view at looking at what we have currently regarding the evolution of AI, and of course what we think can come in the next couple of months and also in the next couple of years as well. And today, we are also talking about agent, and they're getting more abilities with tools and agent. And will we ever have an instance where all we need to do is to have minimal input as an human being, and then the AI do more of the work? That's the scenario this picture is playing there. So back to me. My name is Solomon Davis. I'm currently a senior platform engineer at Inflow. Inflow built auditing applications for firms around the world, and I'm a member of the engineering team where we build tools to help um, other teams as well. So um, this is an overview of my career. Before I started my career formally, while I was in college at the university, I was a Microsoft student partner, and I remember enjoying building software and basically applications for all of these platforms there. To the left, you have the Windows Phone 7, 8 versions, and the Kinect, and EWP and Cortana. Yeah, Cortana was they call it smart. It was an agent that runs on your phone, or I think on Windows as well, just like Alexa or Siri on Apple. Cortana was the same thing, equivalent for Microsoft. And I used to build apps for Xbox and Windows 8 and the Windows Azure when it was new. Then I used the expression tools a lot. We have the design, expression blend, expression studio, expression web, and expression encoder, and XNA framework, which was also a game tool which can use to build apps coupled with Silverlight targeting Windows phones and Windows Windows 8 when it was new. So in my career from 2016, I've this is practically an overview. I started with building desktop and mobile apps, WPF, and also Xamarin. Then building enterprise products on Windows servers. Then in the middle, I switched to backend engineering, focusing on that. And of course, with .NET Core, we could you could extend your .NET apps into Linux, which was the next best thing that happened with the unification. And currently I've moved into platform, building tools, and of course supporting deployment to different cloud providers, especially Azure. So today, briefly, we'll be talking about these 6 things: AI vision for Microsoft Copilot. Jared spoke a lot about Copilot, so we might not want to talk too much today. Then, in the second part, we have embedded reasoning and contextual intelligence. So, for those that are completely new to Copilot, you have some kind of guide in understanding how it works. Then I'm going to talk about the .NET 10 AI Foundation, which was introduced actually from .NET 9. Now we're in 10. So it will discuss how the standardized um, access to AI in the namespaces. Then, of course, um, semantic kernel, which is the SDK that allows .NET developers to talk to large language models, and a very short demo. Then we see a few practical takeaways. Yeah, AI is not everywhere, um, and the way AI is evolving, the entire industries, the entire sectors of all the world will eventually be touched by an intelligent piece of software. It can be a tool, it can be agent, it could be text generation, image generation. You're going to find the footprint of AI everywhere, and it might be ugly, it might be beautiful, but it's really a thing that we all have to contribute and shape the evolution, so we never lose control about it. So Microsoft is also building a lot of AI products built around the business suite, Microsoft 365, and of course we have Copilot being in the center of this for enterprise. And they've adopted an AI first vision to provide this AI experience to improve work and to bring out more productivity from employees of companies. So as a developer or an engineer, I'm more interested in 3 of these, which is the GitHub Copilot, the Microsoft 365 Copilot, and the Copilot Studio as well, that allows you to build the agent. So the GitHub Copilot is a product for those that are not familiar with it, and a refresher for those that are ready. It's a suite that is built in particularly for developers. You have to install it with your IDE or use it on the GitHub website, and it aids an engineer to write better code or design. You can use it for documentation, you can use it to write your code, you can use it to improve your code for code reviews. You could generate text, you could do a bunch of other things from it, and yeah, it's one of those things. And for the web version, you could easily prompt when you're trying to create a repository on GitHub. You can easily have a boiler template or something to start your project by entering a text prompt. So in your national language, you can compose something, and then, for example, it can be, I need a console app to do XYZ, and it is going to build you something very basic that then you can clone your new repository and build on that, which is quite helpful for little projects. And of course, there's CLI for those that have particular interest in writing commands on the terminal. The seller is very interesting. I've played with it. I've not adopted it yet because of use cases. I'm still good doing things the traditional way, but many people have found it very, very useful. So back to the Microsoft 365 Copilot. So if you work in an organization that has the Microsoft Office suite, then you should have come across all these products: Teams, Outlook, OneNote, and the rest. And all of these have been integrated into AI for some improvement. How? For example, on Teams, you could use AI to recap a meeting. You can ask questions about different topics or chat with your colleagues, or to extract notes from meetings. You can as well let it compose different topics or articles or things to post to different channels for you. Each of these interactions is enabled by tools and agents that have been built into Microsoft 365. And I think it's very, very interesting. And Copilot is right in the center of all this. Copilot has the chat and the search, and we have notebooks, we have crates. So basically, you could search company-wide information from your company. You could, just the way a search engine can bring you information from the web. So this is specifically built to give you information within your company. That's for the search. You can chat with it about maybe company events, meetings, and the rest. You could create graphs and charts, and you can create telemetry of different things, different data. You could make many of different data that have been generated by your organization, and it has specialized agents that are also very, very specific in achieving some of these things, like the researcher and the analyst, and many, many more. Some are still in preview, while some are live already. So, how does Copilot Studio come in? You could see we have Copilot here that acts as the main interface with Woman. On the other side, it takes in natural language input. Then those can be transferred to Copilot Studio. That really does this orchestration and determines what agents to use, and then it could do the running around and bring back the results. And it has been called the Copilot control system. So basically, Copilot does the human augmentation, where you could talk to it in your natural language. Then, of course, it can serve as a personal assistant, and you could have one-on-one chat with it every time, even on your operating system. While the agents are automatic or semi-autonomous, they are connected to each other. They can fetch data, you can transfer data to each other. For example, you can use an agent you can send in an input that will result in you creating calendar invitations for a meeting. You can automate tasks. As a .NET engineer, or as an engineer that uses .NET a lot, how does all of these things help me, or how can I improve my work with this? Yeah. Interestingly, we have .NET 10, and of course the release of Visual Studio 2026. So we'll be talking more about the .NET's priority, democratizing access, and standardization that we've enjoyed a lot since .NET 9 and 10 as well. So the main over the years, my career, I've observed that there are so many tools that are revolutionary, or so many services that get launched, then there won't be support for .NET. You will see supported language like Python, Java, Go, JavaScript, etc. And then no.NET language will be supported. And sometimes this is done by Microsoft. So the .NET engineers have to use REST APIs if they're available to everybody to achieve your goal. Sometimes you might decide to write a wrapper around it and bring that into your code base. So in the effort to bring this access to developers, Microsoft created certain extensions that helps, which is inbuilt, that helps people interact with AI, which is the Microsoft extension AI and the extensions vector data, numerics, tensors. So the focus is really on this first one, the Microsoft extensions AI. So it's a plumbing layer that brings you access to plug in your application to talk to different large language models. And this is very, very interesting. So there are a set of nugget packages. You have the Master Extensions AI, then you can have different connectors that plug in directly to different large language models. I'll show you in the next slide. Then it can integrate seamlessly into your .NET project. You can bring in services using VI, and then you can easily take away that responsibility of writing different integrations for OpenAI, for this, for that. Everything is built in. So as of 3 months ago, this is what we have. So I don't know if you can see my mouse. Oh, okay. So this is the namespace to bring in. So you can easily bring any of these namespaces, right? You have the extensions AI, you have the connectors. I've played so much around with the Google connector, which connect directly to Gemini. And you have this interface, the iChat client interface that you could use to initialize the client of your large language model, plug in your API key and the model, and you are good to go. It's as simple as that. So semantic kernel is actually the SDK that Microsoft has built. It's open source and it allows .NET engineers to plug into their large language model. So as many people have observed, different models have different strengths, different abilities. You don't want to get stuck to one. You want to maybe for documentation, you have realized that this model is better for documentations. For coding, this is better. You don't have to have different implementations for each of these large language models. With semantic kernel, you can build a very sophisticated interfacing with all of these things together, which is quite interesting for us. And as different features come in every week, there are frequent releases that get added into these nugget packages that helps the work happen faster. Then we talk about semantic functions. So I'll talk about definition, the purpose, the bridge. So with semantic kernel, you can expose semantic functions, very, very similar to MCP, where you can define MCP functions as well that can be discovered by your IDE, for example. And these functions can determine, it can help AI agents understand when to call your functions and how to talk to your functions. And that's something I also find very, very interesting. So, for example, you could have a semantic function that gets you the latest stock price for Microsoft, and you can define it, and it's going to call that method without you having a direct implementation to that method, which is the traditional way that people do things. Then, of course, you can also have something that sends an email based on natural language initiation. You could have something. could customize. I mean, you could build it to adapt to your existing solutions or company. These are just for demo. Then back in .NET 9, you could see things that we have available and how these things fit together. So the large language model gives you that core intelligence, the text generation, the reasoning or the thinking, whatever it thinks it's doing. Then we have some of the frontiers that provides those core technologies. Then you have Microsoft extension of AI, which is a connector, and it's of course consumes information from the large language models and can bring it into your code using dependency injections on the services there. Then you have the semantic kernel, which is the SDK, which does the orchestration, reasoning, deciding what tool to use, what methods to use, and you have the connector libraries as well, OpenAI, Gemini, and the rest. And of course, at the base, you have your C# business logic, which is what does your business goals, and it contains your code. So I'm going to show you briefly a sample code application. Let's see. Okay. I think my screen is tiny. I have to. Okay. So if you look at my code here, yeah, you could see the namespace, which is the semantic kernel, and in this place you could use the Google connector. So these are nugget packages that you can bring into your code base, and then you configure the model, you set your model ID, you set your API key, then so you can use the kernel builder, or you can actually bring in the builder into your host. Then you initialize the builder services here, and then and the builder, and then there's one method to rule them all. Yeah, invoke. So the um invoke prompt async, yeah, that's the method. So with this same method, you can talk to all the supported, about 12 of them, 12 large language models with this, and you're going to get a response from it. So it's the same experience that you might have had talking to any other large language models on the web, which is maybe Copilot and Gemini. Um, I so I'm just going to talk to it a bit, and it's just going to give me. So it's going to talk to. It's going to use semantic kernel, talk to Gemini, and give me a response. Yeah, it's back. So basically, this is very very straightforward to me. I don't have to be looking for SDKs or nugget packages for different large language models because I want to use them. Um, in my products, I could use this easily, and I'm good. Then, excuse me. Okay. So yeah, this is the code that I was. This is the demo. Done it. So like I said, this is the code in brief. You could bring in your Hugging Face or Llama, Mistral, Azure interference, everything. You could actually bring them here. Just add them here, and then you build it, and you can use this invoke to talk to them and get your response. It's as good as that. Yeah. So the future I think the future of surely for .NET engineers and even for all developers is that AI is here to stay. Many companies, individuals might not find immediate use cases. Of course, there might be um, reluctances to adopt agents, but I think with the way it is changing, the way it's evolving, it's getting smarter, and the frontiers are also finding more interesting use cases. So I think in the long run, there will be clear, observed, improved productivity by using this agent. Of course, um, in terms of code reviews, in terms of actually writing bullet templating, developers are already observing um, increase in the productivity by time reduction, the time it takes to do very basic things that are repeated. You can use AI to do that while you remain um, the thinker. And of course, with .NET 10, we are seeing more new stuff, and of course, continuous support for AI being baked in. And I think that's very, very interesting for me. For yeah, so I see a future where human being we remain in control. We still be the brain behind how we want to build software, and how we want to build policies that govern our software. But we can, of course, have an AI as a real copilot to do some of the checks, and of course to do some of the boring stuff for us. So that's the way I see it. So in summary, Copilot from Microsoft is changing how the modern workplace is today, and they've also supported the developers in .NET 9, 10 to easily build AI stuff, and semantic kernel and the coming Microsoft agentic framework with AutoGen. They'll be leading that revolution. So if you want to learn more, you could scan that QR code there, and 3, 2, 1. Thank you. So that'll be all for me.
Thanks. Great session. So a quick question. Why have you decided to use semantic kernel instead of like the new agent framework?
I think for me it was something when I discovered it, I decided to adopt it. You can't try out everything. So many tools out there every 3 weeks, and I found it quite interesting. And I think some of the controls they were in the previous state, but over time they've been released, and I find it quite useful. But I still play around with other ones. Yeah, and the incoming Microsoft Agentic framework it doesn't have a lot of features already at this time, but it's something I'm willing to try out later on.
Okay, great. Any question, Jared and Kevin?
No, as a traditional IT pro, that most of that session went over my head, and I'm glad you could follow it, Nick. But I see we've got a number of people on, so obviously a very interesting session for folks that are in that space. Don't see any questions coming in on any of the socials though, so I guess you explained it really, really well.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So Nick, I think we wrap it up. If there is any other questions coming in, we'll reach out to the guys separately, and we'll get those questions and answers out to folks. But I think overall it was good session from the two guys, and really appreciate their time.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, and see you next month. Thank you.
Cheers, folks.